The morning sun cast long shadows across the agricultural colony of New Haven as 8-year-old Marcus Chen chased his pet rabbit through the wheat fields. His laughter echoed across the peaceful settlement, where 300 human families had built their new home among the rolling hills of Kepler 442b. The planet's twin suns painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, creating a paradise that seemed too perfect to be real. Marcus didn't notice the dark shapes moving through the tall grain stalks. He was too focused on Snowball, his white rabbit who had somehow escaped from her hutch again. The boy's small feet kicked up clouds of golden dust as he ran, his bright red jacket a splash of color against the endless fields. High above, Captain Sarah Chen monitored the morning routine from the colony's central tower. As Marcus's mother and the settlement's security chief, she maintained constant vigilance despite the planet's seemingly peaceful nature. Her scanner screens showed the usual patterns: farmers tending their crops, children playing in designated safe zones, and the automated defense grid humming quietly in the background. The first sign of trouble came not from her instruments, but from her mother's intuition. Marcus had been gone too long. His morning play sessions never lasted more than an hour, and it had been nearly 2. Sarah activated her comm unit and tried to reach her son. "Marcus, honey, time to come home for breakfast." Static answered her call. Sarah's blood ran cold. The communication network on New Haven had never failed. Not once in the 3 years since colonization began. She immediately switched to the emergency frequency and contacted the perimeter guards. "This is Control. I need eyes on Sector 7. My son is not responding to comm calls." Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled back within seconds. "Control, I'm seeing movement in the grain fields. Something large. Multiple contacts." Sarah's hands flew across her control panel, activating every scanner and sensor in the colony's network. What she saw made her heart stop. Dozens of heat signatures were moving through the wheat fields in coordinated patterns. They were surrounding Marcus's last known position. The Kethtar had found them. For months, intelligence reports had filtered through the human colonies about a species that viewed all other life forms as inferior. The Kethtar were described as methodical hunters who took pleasure in the systematic destruction of what they considered lesser beings. They had already wiped out 2 alien civilizations in the Outer Rim, leaving nothing but ash and broken worlds in their wake. But New Haven was supposed to be safe, hidden, protected by layers of stealth technology and electromagnetic shields that made the planet invisible to most scanning systems. Sarah grabbed her rifle and burst through the control room doors. "All units, code red. Hostile contacts in the agricultural zone. Civilian in danger." She sprinted across the colony's main plaza, her boots echoing off the metal walkways. Other colonists emerged from their homes, confusion evident on their faces. These were farmers, scientists, and engineers. They had come to New Haven to build a better life, not to fight wars. As Sarah reached the edge of the settlement, she could see the wheat fields swaying in unnatural patterns. Something massive was moving through them, and it was heading directly toward where she had last seen Marcus playing. Her comm unit crackled to life. It was Rodriguez again, but his voice was strained with terror. "Control, I can see them now." "Dear God, what are those things?" Sarah raised her binoculars and focused on the grain fields. What she saw would haunt her nightmares forever. The Kethtar were 8 feet tall, with elongated limbs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Their exoskeletons gleamed like black metal in the morning sun, and their movements were fluid and predatory. They moved in perfect coordination, like a pack of wolves closing in on prey. And in the center of their formation, she could see a small figure in a red jacket. Marcus was sitting in a cleared circle in the wheat, clutching Snowball to his chest. He was completely surrounded, but the creatures hadn't harmed him yet. They seemed to be studying him, tilting their triangular heads as if trying to understand what they had found. Sarah's training kicked in. She activated the colony's emergency protocols, sending automated distress signals to Earth and the nearest human military outpost. But help was weeks away at best. Whatever happened next, the colonists of New Haven would face it alone. She gathered the colony's 12 security personnel and quickly briefed them on the situation. They were outnumbered at least 3-1, facing an enemy that had proven capable of destroying entire worlds. But none of that mattered. A human child was in danger, and that was all they needed to know. The rescue team moved through the wheat fields in practiced formations. Sarah led the group, her rifle trained on the nearest Kethtar warrior. As they got closer, she could hear Marcus talking to his rabbit in the innocent voice that only children possessed. "It's okay, Snowball. Mom will come get us. She always comes when I'm scared." The sound of her son's voice, calm and trusting even in the face of mortal danger, filled Sarah with a cold rage she had never experienced before. These creatures had threatened her child. They had brought fear and violence to the peaceful world her people had worked so hard to build. The Kethtar noticed the approaching humans long before Sarah's team reached the clearing. They turned toward the colonists with fluid grace, their claws extending from hidden sheaths in their forearms. Sarah could see intelligence in their multifaceted eyes, along with something else that made her skin crawl. They were enjoying this. The largest Kethtar, clearly the pack leader, stepped forward and began speaking in a harsh, clicking language. Sarah's universal translator struggled for a moment before providing a rough approximation of the creature's words. "Inferior beings, you have built your nest on Kethtar hunting grounds. We claim this territory and all life within it. The small one will serve as an example of what happens to those who trespass in our domain." Sarah raised her rifle, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "Release the child. He's done nothing to harm you." The pack leader's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Harm is not required for death, inferior one, only proximity. Your species lacks the strength to exist in a universe where the Kethtar reign supreme." What happened next lasted only seconds, but Sarah would replay it in her mind for the rest of her life. The pack leader raised one massive claw toward Marcus, who looked up at the creature with the fearless curiosity that only a child could possess. "Are you a monster?" Marcus asked, still clutching his rabbit. "My dad says monsters aren't real, but you look like the ones in my picture books." The Kethtar paused, as if considering the question. Then its claw swept down in a vicious arc. Sarah's rifle spoke first. The high-energy plasma bolt catching the creature's center mass and sending it stumbling backward. The other security personnel opened fire immediately, their weapons lighting up the morning sky with deadly brilliance. But they were too late to prevent everything. The pack leader's claw had found its mark, leaving 3 deep gashes across Marcus's chest. The boy's red jacket turned a darker shade of crimson as he collapsed into the wheat. "Marcus!" Sarah's scream echoed across the fields as she sprinted toward her son, firing wildly at any Kethtar that moved. The creatures scattered under the intense plasma fire, their tactical advantage lost in the face of desperate human fury. Sarah reached Marcus just as the boy's eyes fluttered closed. Blood seeped through her fingers as she tried to stop the bleeding. Her medical training warring with her maternal panic. The wounds were deep, but they had missed his vital organs. He would live, but only if she could get him to the medical facility immediately. Lieutenant Rodriguez and 2 other guards formed a protective circle around Sarah as she lifted Marcus's unconscious form. The Kethtar had retreated to the edges of the clearing but hadn't fled entirely. They watched the humans with predatory patience, clearly planning their next move. "Fall back to the colony," Sarah ordered, her voice raw with emotion. "Get the medical team ready for emergency surgery." The retreat through the wheat fields became a running battle. The Kethtar harassed the humans from multiple angles, their superior speed and agility allowing them to strike and disappear before the colonists could respond effectively. 2 security personnel fell to the creature's claws before the group reached the safety of the settlement's energy barriers. Dr. Elizabeth Hendricks, the colony's chief medical officer, was waiting in the emergency bay when Sarah burst through the doors carrying Marcus. The doctor took one look at the boy's injuries and immediately began barking orders to her staff. "Prep Surgery Suite 2. I need a full trauma team and 4 units of O-negative blood. Move!" As the medical team wheeled Marcus away, Sarah found herself alone in the corridor, her son's blood still staining her hands. The reality of what had happened began to sink in. The Kethtar had found New Haven. They had hurt her child, and they weren't going to stop until every human on the planet was dead. Sarah made her way to the colony's communication center, where her technical staff was already working to boost their emergency beacon's signal strength. She needed to contact Earth immediately. The colonial government needed to know what they were facing. But as she reached for the communication controls, Sarah realized something that made her blood run cold. The Kethtar attack hadn't been random. They had specifically targeted Marcus, using the boy as bait to draw out the colony's defenders. This wasn't a territorial dispute or a resource conflict. This was a test. The creatures were evaluating human responses, learning how the colonists would react under pressure. They were gathering intelligence for something much larger than a simple raid on an agricultural settlement. Sarah's hands shook as she composed her message to Earth. She tried to keep her voice steady, professional. But the image of her son lying bleeding in the wheat kept intruding on her thoughts. "Earth Command, this is New Haven Colony. We are under attack by hostile alien forces. Species designation Kethtar. They have superior numbers and technology. Casualties reported, including..." Sarah paused, her throat tightening. "Including my 8-year-old son." She took a deep breath and continued. "Request immediate military assistance. The Kethtar appear to be conducting intelligence-gathering operations. This may be preparation for a larger assault on human territories. New Haven will attempt to hold position, but our defensive capabilities are limited." As Sarah finished her transmission, Dr. Hendricks appeared in the doorway of the communications center. The woman's surgical scrubs were stained with blood, but her expression was cautiously optimistic. "Marcus is stable," the doctor reported. "The wounds were deep, but clean. No organ damage, and the bleeding is under control. He's going to need extensive recovery time, but he'll make a full recovery." Relief flooded through Sarah's body, followed immediately by a cold, hard anger that surprised her with its intensity. Her son would live, but he would carry the scars of this attack for the rest of his life. The Kethtar had marked a human child simply because they could. They had brought terror and violence to a peaceful world where children should be able to play safely in wheat fields. That was a mistake they would come to regret. Sarah turned back to the communication console and began composing a second message. This one wasn't going to Earth Command. It was going to the Colonial Defense Network, the Merchant Marine, and every human military unit within 50 light years of New Haven. "Attention all human forces. This is Captain Sarah Chen, New Haven Colony. A hostile alien species has attacked our settlement and injured a human child. The creatures show no regard for innocent life and appear to be preparing for expanded operations against human territories." She paused, thinking about Marcus lying in the medical bay, about the fear in his eyes as the Kethtar surrounded him, about the predatory satisfaction she had seen in the creature's alien faces. "I am requesting immediate assistance from any and all available units. These aliens need to learn that harming human children carries consequences, serious consequences." As Sarah sent her message into the void of space, she had no idea that her words would reach the ears of Admiral James Morrison, commander of the Third Fleet, who had been looking for an excuse to test humanity's newest military technologies. She didn't know that her transmission would be intercepted by the crew of the merchant vessel Defiant, whose captain had lost his own family to alien raiders years earlier. She couldn't have imagined that her desperate plea for help would eventually reach the desk of General Patricia Hayes, head of human colonial operations, who had been waiting for proof that the Kethtar posed a genuine threat to human expansion. All Sarah knew was that her son had been hurt, and someone needed to pay for that crime. The first phase of humanity's response to the Kethtar threat had begun, triggered not by strategic considerations or political calculations, but by a mother's love for her injured child. The aliens had made their opening move. Soon they would discover that humanity's reply would be written in fire and fury across the stars themselves. Admiral James Morrison received Sarah Chen's transmission while reviewing tactical reports in his flagship's command center. The United Earth Navy's Third Fleet was conducting routine patrol operations near the Centauri border when the desperate message from New Haven reached their communication arrays. Morrison was a career military officer who had spent 30 years defending human colonies from various threats. He had fought pirates, dealt with territorial disputes, and negotiated with dozens of alien species. But something about Sarah's message struck him differently than the usual requests for assistance. Maybe it was the raw emotion in her voice when she mentioned her injured son. Maybe it was the clinical way she described the Kethtar's tactical behavior. Or maybe it was the simple fact that these creatures had deliberately targeted a human child as part of their intelligence-gathering operation. Whatever the reason, Morrison found himself staring at the star charts with unusual intensity. New Haven was 3 days away at maximum burn. His fleet consisted of 12 ships, including 2 heavy cruisers and a full Marine battalion. Standard protocol would be to dispatch a single destroyer to investigate and provide assistance if needed. Instead, Morrison activated his command console and began issuing orders that would change the course of human history. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison. Prepare for emergency deployment to the Kepler system. We are responding to an alien attack on New Haven Colony. All leave is canceled. I want every ship ready for immediate departure within 6 hours. His communications officer, Lieutenant Commander Jackson, looked up from her station with surprise. Sir, shouldn't we contact Earth Command for authorization? This is a significant deployment for what appears to be a small-scale incident. Morrison fixed her with a steady gaze. Lieutenant Commander, when alien raiders attack a human child, there are no small-scale incidents. File the appropriate notifications with Earth Command, but make it clear that we are already en route. As the Third Fleet prepared for departure, Morrison called up the intelligence files on the Kethtar. What he found made his jaw clench with anger. The aliens were responsible for the complete destruction of 2 star systems, including billions of sentient beings. They operated with ruthless efficiency, taking no prisoners and leaving no survivors. But they had never faced humans before. Morrison spent the 3-day journey to New Haven studying every piece of available data on Kethtar tactics and technology. His tactical officers worked around the clock, developing engagement strategies and contingency plans. The fleet's Marine commander, Colonel Sarah Rodriguez, prepared her troops for potential ground operations. By the time they reached the Kepler system, the Third Fleet was ready for war. Meanwhile, on New Haven, the situation had deteriorated rapidly. The Kethtar had increased their activities, sending larger groups to probe the colony's defenses. They seemed particularly interested in the settlement's energy barriers and weapon systems, conducting careful observations from the edges of the defensive perimeter. Captain Sarah Chen had barely slept since the attack on Marcus. She divided her time between coordinating the colony's defense and sitting beside her son's medical bed. The boy was recovering well physically, but the psychological trauma was harder to measure. He had nightmares about creatures with razor-sharp claws, and he refused to go anywhere without an armed escort. Dr. Hendricks had done everything possible to help Marcus heal, but some wounds went deeper than flesh. The boy, who had once run fearlessly through wheat fields, now flinched at unexpected sounds and cried when anyone mentioned playing outside. Sarah's rage had crystallized into something cold and focused during those long nights watching over her son. The Kethtar had stolen her child's innocence, and she wanted them to pay for that crime. But she was a colonial security officer with 12 guards and limited weapons. What could she possibly do against an enemy that had destroyed entire civilizations? The answer came in the form of Admiral Morrison's fleet dropping out of hyperspace like avenging angels. New Haven Colony, this is Admiral Morrison aboard the UES Retribution. We received your distress call. What is your current status? Sarah nearly collapsed with relief as she heard Morrison's voice over the communication system. Admiral, this is Captain Chen. We have approximately 40 Kethtar warriors conducting reconnaissance around our perimeter. They've made several probing attacks, but haven't attempted a full assault yet. Understood, Captain. We're deploying Marine forces immediately. Please transmit all intelligence you've gathered on enemy positions and capabilities. Within hours, the colony's situation had changed completely. Marine dropships landed outside the settlement's energy barriers, disgorging 2 full companies of heavily armed soldiers. The Marines immediately began establishing defensive positions and setting up advanced sensor networks around the entire colony. Colonel Rodriguez set up her command post in the colony's main plaza, where she could coordinate with both the orbital fleet and the ground forces. She was a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat, but she smiled warmly when Sarah brought Marcus to meet her. The boy was still pale and moved carefully to avoid aggravating his healing wounds, but his curiosity about the Marines was stronger than his fear. Rodriguez knelt down to Marcus's eye level and spoke gently. I heard you were very brave when those monsters showed up, young man. My Marines are here to make sure they never bother you again. Marcus looked up at the colonel with wide eyes. Are you going to fight them? They have really big claws, and they move really fast. Rodriguez nodded seriously. We're going to do more than fight them, son. We're going to make sure they understand that hurting human children is the worst mistake they could possibly make. That afternoon, the Kethtar made their first serious error in judgment. A group of 20 warriors approached the colony's eastern perimeter, apparently expecting to continue their reconnaissance activities as they had for the past several days. Instead, they walked directly into a carefully prepared kill zone. Marine sniper teams had been positioned throughout the wheat fields, their advanced camouflage systems making them virtually invisible. Heavy weapons emplacements covered every approach route. Orbital bombardment systems had locked onto predetermined coordinates. When the first Kethtar warrior stepped into the designated engagement zone, Colonel Rodriguez gave a simple order. Fire! The wheat fields erupted in coordinated violence. Plasma rifles spoke with deadly precision, each shot carefully aimed to disable rather than kill. Heavy stunner weapons deployed electromagnetic nets that wrapped around the alien warriors, holding them immobile. Within minutes, all 20 Kethtar were captured alive. Rodriguez had specific plans for the prisoners. The captured aliens were transported to a secure facility within the colony, where they were separated and placed in individual holding cells. Rodriguez wanted to interrogate them, but more importantly, she wanted to send a message to whatever Kethtar forces remained in the area. The interrogation of the pack leader proved particularly illuminating. The creature, designated as Subject Alpha, initially refused to communicate with its human captors. It clicked and hissed in its native language, occasionally spitting what were obviously curses and threats. But Rodriguez had dealt with hostile prisoners before. She had Subject Alpha brought to the colony's medical bay, where Marcus was receiving his daily treatment for his injuries. The boy was reading a picture book while Dr. Hendricks changed his bandages, completely unaware of the alien presence. Subject Alpha's attitude changed the moment it saw the human child. The creature's multifaceted eyes focused on Marcus's healing wounds with what appeared to be surprise. It began speaking rapidly in its clicking language, and the universal translator struggled to keep up. "The small one lives? This was not expected. Our intelligence indicated that your species abandons wounded offspring as a survival strategy." Rodriguez leaned forward in her chair, her voice dangerously quiet. "Your intelligence was wrong. Humans don't abandon our children. We protect them. And when someone hurts them, we make that someone regret it for the rest of their very short lives." Subject Alpha tilted its triangular head, studying Rodriguez with new interest. "You speak of revenge? This is familiar. The Kethtar understand such concepts." "Good," Rodriguez replied. "Then you'll understand what's coming next." The colonel activated her portable communication unit and contacted Admiral Morrison directly. "Admiral, I'm ready to begin the demonstration. Please have all ships target the coordinates I'm transmitting." High above New Haven, the Third Fleet's weapon systems came online. 12 warships aligned their main batteries toward a barren section of the planet's surface, approximately 50 kilometers from the colony. The area was completely uninhabited, consisting mainly of rocky hills and sparse vegetation. Rodriguez turned back to Subject Alpha, whose translator was still processing her previous words. "Watch carefully," she said, pointing to a monitor that showed the targeted area. "This is what happens to people who hurt human children." The orbital bombardment lasted exactly 30 seconds. 12 ships fired in coordinated sequence, their energy weapons carving the landscape into molten glass. The targeted area simply ceased to exist, replaced by a perfectly circular crater that glowed with residual heat. Subject Alpha stared at the monitor in what appeared to be shock. Its mandibles clicked rapidly as it spoke. Such destruction. You would devastate worlds for the sake of one offspring?" Rodriguez smiled, but there was no warmth in the expression. "That was just a warning shot. You want to see what we do when we're actually angry?" The alien's response was immediate and urgent. It began speaking rapidly, its translator working overtime to convert the flood of clicking sounds into human language. "The Kethtar pack leaders must be informed. Your species possesses capabilities far beyond our initial assessments. This changes the strategic calculations for the entire hunting expedition." Rodriguez had been hoping for exactly this reaction. "Tell me about this hunting expedition. How many ships? How many warriors? What are your objectives?" Subject Alpha hesitated, its loyalty to its own species warring with its newfound respect for human military capabilities. Rodriguez decided to provide additional motivation. "Marcus," she called to the boy, who looked up from his picture book with innocent curiosity. "Come here for a moment, please." The child approached Rodriguez's chair, moving carefully but without obvious fear. Subject Alpha's eyes tracked his movement with intense focus, clearly noting the healing wounds and the boy's cautious gait. Rodriguez placed a protective hand on Marcus's shoulder. "This is the child your people attacked," she told the alien. "He's 8 years old. He was playing with his pet rabbit when your warriors surrounded him. He asked if they were monsters from his picture books." Subject Alpha's mandibles clicked in what might have been distress. "The small one showed no fear, even surrounded by Kethtar warriors?" "He's a human child," Rodriguez replied simply. "Bravery is in our nature, but so is the desire to protect our young from creatures who would harm them." The alien looked from Marcus to Rodriguez, then back to the monitor showing the cooling crater. Something in its alien psychology seemed to shift, as if it was reassessing everything it thought it knew about human civilization. "The hunting expedition consists of 47 ships," Subject Alpha began, its voice subdued. "Nearly 3,000 warriors. Our objective was to evaluate human defensive capabilities and identify potential weaknesses for future exploitation." Rodriguez nodded, unsurprised by the scope of the threat. "And where is this fleet located?" 3 solar days from this system, awaiting our reconnaissance reports. The pack leaders expected minimal resistance from your colony. They planned to use your settlement as a training ground for younger warriors. The casual way Subject Alpha described the planned massacre made Rodriguez's blood run cold. The Kethtar had intended to use New Haven's 300 civilians as target practice for their inexperienced fighters. That information needed to reach Admiral Morrison immediately. Rodriguez activated her emergency communication channel. Admiral, priority transmission. The Kethtar have a fleet of 47 ships approaching this system. They're planning to use New Haven as a training exercise for their warriors. Morrison's response was immediate and decisive. Understood, Colonel. I'm contacting Earth Command for additional support. We're going to need everything we can get. But even as reinforcements were being summoned, Rodriguez knew that the real battle had already begun. It wasn't being fought with weapons or ships, but with information and psychology. The Kethtar had underestimated humanity's protective instincts and technological capabilities. Now they were about to learn why that was a fatal mistake. Subject Alpha continued providing intelligence about Kethtar tactics and technology, clearly motivated by a combination of fear and genuine respect for human military power. But Rodriguez sensed that the alien was holding something back, some crucial piece of information that could change everything. She decided to try a different approach. Instead of continuing the interrogation, she had Subject Alpha brought to the colony's observation deck, where it could see the full scope of human activity on New Haven. Children played in secured recreation areas while their parents worked in the agricultural fields. Families shared meals together in community dining halls. Scientists conducted research in laboratories while artists created beautiful sculptures and paintings. Subject Alpha watched these scenes with obvious confusion. Your warriors, they protect these activities? These non-combat functions serve some strategic purpose? Rodriguez smiled, this time with genuine warmth. They're not strategic. They're what we're fighting for: family, community, the right to live peaceful lives without fear. The alien continued observing the human settlement, its alien mind struggling to process concepts that had no equivalent in Kethtar society. Finally, it turned back to Rodriguez with something that might have been understanding. The young one you showed me, Subject Alpha said slowly. He represents all of these humans to you, all of their potential futures. This is why his injury provoked such an extreme response. Now you're beginning to understand, Rodriguez replied, and you need to communicate that understanding to your fleet commanders. Because if they proceed with their attack on this colony, humanity is going to respond with everything we have. Subject Alpha's mandibles clicked in what the translator identified as acknowledgement. The pack leaders must be warned. Your species fights not for territory or resources, but for concepts we do not comprehend. This makes you unpredictable. Rodriguez nodded grimly. Very unpredictable. And very, very angry. As Subject Alpha was returned to its holding cell, Rodriguez began preparing for the next phase of her operation. The Kethtar fleet was still 3 days away, which gave her time to implement a plan that would ensure they understood exactly what they were dealing with. She was going to give them a demonstration of human capabilities that they would never forget, assuming any of them survived long enough to remember it. The Kethtar hunting fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system with predatory confidence. 47 ships arranged themselves in traditional hunting formation, their weapon systems powered but not yet activated. Fleet Commander Varthak expected this to be a simple exercise in demonstrating Kethtar superiority to his younger warriors. The intelligence reports from the reconnaissance team had described a lightly defended agricultural colony with minimal military capabilities. The humans would provide adequate target practice for warriors who had never participated in a proper hunt. It would be educational and entertaining. Varthak's expectations began to change the moment his sensors detected the human fleet waiting for him. Fleet Commander, his tactical officer reported. We are detecting 43 human vessels in defensive formation around the fourth planet. Configuration suggests heavy military units with support craft. Varthak's mandibles clicked in annoyance. The reconnaissance team had reported no significant military presence in the system. Either they had been incompetent, or the humans had somehow assembled a defensive force with impossible speed. Analysis, he ordered curtly. His tactical officer worked frantically at his sensor console. Sir, the human ships appear to be from multiple fleets. I'm reading designation codes from the 3rd, 7th, and 9th Colonial Defense Groups, plus several merchant marine vessels that have been configured for combat operations. The implications hit Varthak like a physical blow. The humans had somehow managed to assemble a multi-fleet task force in response to what should have been a minor border incident. This level of mobilization suggested either exceptional military efficiency or something else entirely, something he didn't want to consider. Open a communication channel to the reconnaissance team, Varthak ordered. I want a full report on their activities. The response came back within minutes, but it wasn't what Varthak expected to hear. Instead of his own warriors, a human voice spoke from the communication system in accented but understandable Keth-Tar language. Fleet Commander Varthak, this is Colonel Rodriguez of the United Earth Marine Corps. Your reconnaissance team is currently our guest. They have been very helpful in explaining your intentions for this system. Varthak's blood ran cold. No human should have been able to speak Keth-Tar, and certainly not with the formal military inflections that Rodriguez was using. Someone had been teaching the humans their language, providing them with cultural and tactical intelligence, someone from his own reconnaissance team. I demand the immediate return of my warriors, Varthak snarled into the communication system. The Keth-Tar do not negotiate with inferior species. Rodriguez's response carried a note of dark amusement. I'm afraid your warriors won't be going anywhere until we've resolved a small problem. You see, one of your people attacked a human child. That's something we take very seriously. One offspring, Varthak replied dismissively. Surely the death of a single young creature is insignificant in the larger scope of species interaction. The silence that followed lasted long enough for Varthak to wonder if the communication link had been severed. When Rodriguez spoke again, her voice carried a deadly calm that made the fleet commander's claws extend involuntarily. The child didn't die, but that's beside the point. You need to understand something about humans, Varthak. When you hurt one of our children, you hurt all of us. And when you hurt all of us, we respond accordingly. Before Varthak could reply, his sensor officer called out in alarm. Fleet Commander! The human ships are powering weapon systems. I'm reading massive energy buildups across their entire formation. Varthak looked at his tactical display and felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. The human fleet was moving with perfect coordination, their ships arranging themselves in attack formations that seemed to anticipate every possible Keth-Tar counter-maneuver. But that wasn't what terrified him. What terrified him was the sheer number of human vessels now visible on his sensors. The 43 ships he had initially detected were just the advance guard. Dozens more were emerging from concealment, including several massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Keth-Tar fleet. Sir, his tactical officer reported in a shaking voice, I'm now reading 112 human vessels, multiple battleship classes, carrier groups, and support craft. They've assembled what appears to be an entire sector fleet. Varthak stared at the display in disbelief. The humans had mobilized more military power than most species possessed in their entire space navies. All of this in response to a minor incident involving a single colony and one injured offspring. Either the humans were completely insane, or they operated according to principles that Keth-Tar military doctrine couldn't comprehend. Rodriguez's voice cut through his confused thoughts. We're transmitting coordinates for your surrender, Fleet Commander. You have 10 minutes to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Surrender! Varthak's voice rose to a harsh screech. "The Kethtar do not surrender to inferior species. We are the apex hunters of the galaxy." "You were," Rodriguez replied calmly. "Right up until you decided to hunt human children. That changed things considerably." What happened next would become known in human military history as the Battle of New Haven, though most participants agreed that calling it a battle was generous to the Kethtar. The engagement lasted exactly 14 minutes and resulted in the complete destruction of 39 alien warships. The remaining 8 Kethtar vessels survived only because Admiral Morrison specifically ordered them to be disabled rather than destroyed. He wanted prisoners for interrogation and, more importantly, survivors to spread word of what had happened. Varthak's flagship was among the captured vessels. The fleet commander found himself in the humiliating position of being marched through the corridors of a human ship, while his crew was processed by efficient and professional enemy soldiers. He was brought to Admiral Morrison's ready room, where the human naval officer was reviewing tactical reports from the brief engagement. Morrison looked up as Varthak was escorted inside, his expression neutral but his eyes cold as winter steel. "Fleet Commander Varthak, I assume. I'm Admiral Morrison. Please, have a seat." Varthak remained standing, his pride still intact despite his military defeat. "I will not accept hospitality from those who would massacre surrendering warriors." Morrison raised an eyebrow. "Your ships didn't surrender. They maintained active weapons locks on our vessels right up until we disabled their power systems, but you're missing the larger point." "Which is?" Morrison activated a holographic display showing the engagement from multiple angles. Varthak watched his fleet being systematically torn apart by human weapons that seemed to anticipate every defensive maneuver his ships attempted. "The larger point," Morrison continued, "is that this entire battle was unnecessary. You could have avoided this outcome very easily." Varthak's mandibles clicked in confusion. "How?" "By not attacking a human child." The simple statement hung in the air between them like an unexploded bomb. Varthak studied Morrison's expression, looking for some sign of deception or tactical misdirection. He found none. "You mobilized over 100 warships because of a single juvenile organism?" Morrison nodded gravely. "That's exactly what we did, and we'll do it again, every single time someone threatens one of our children." Varthak felt his understanding of galactic politics shifting beneath him like unstable ground. The Kethtar had conquered dozens of species, all of which had eventually accepted defeat when the costs became too high. None of them had ever responded to limited aggression with overwhelming force. "This is irrational," he said finally. "The resources you have expended far exceed any strategic value this colony might possess." Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "You're thinking like a Kethtar, Fleet Commander. Humans don't base our decisions purely on strategic calculations. We base them on principle. Principle. The principle that our children should be able to play in wheat fields without fear. The principle that no one gets to hurt a human child and walk away unpunished. The principle that some things are worth fighting for regardless of cost." Morrison stood and moved to a viewport that showed New Haven in the distance. The planet looked peaceful from space, its agricultural zones creating green patches against the brown continents. "Down there," Morrison continued, "there's an 8-year-old boy named Marcus Chen. He's recovering from injuries your people inflicted on him. He has nightmares now, and he's afraid to go outside. His mother has barely slept since your warriors attacked him." Varthak found himself listening despite his determination to maintain hostile silence. "Now," Morrison said, turning back to face the alien commander, "you might think that one child's trauma is insignificant in the grand scheme of galactic politics. You might believe that strong species should be able to prey on weak ones without consequences." Morrison's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. You would be wrong. The Admiral activated his communication system. Colonel Rodriguez, please bring Marcus to my ready room. Within minutes, the door opened and Rodriguez entered with a small boy who moved carefully, but without obvious fear. Marcus looked around the room with curious eyes, taking in the alien prisoner with the same interest he might show for an unusual animal at a zoo. "Hi," Marcus said to Varthak in a friendly voice. "Are you the leader of the monsters who hurt me?" Varthak stared at the human child, noting the healing wounds visible beneath his loose clothing. The boy showed no signs of hatred or fear, just innocent curiosity about the creature who had ordered his injury. Yes, Varthak replied, his voice uncertain for the first time in decades. "I commanded the warriors who attacked your settlement." Marcus nodded seriously. "Mom says you didn't know that humans protect their kids really well. She says that's why all these big ships showed up to make sure you couldn't hurt any more children." The boy stepped closer to Varthak, close enough that the alien could smell the medical antiseptic used to treat his wounds. Marcus looked up at the towering creature without a trace of fear. "Are you going to try to hurt kids again? Because Mom says if you do, the humans will be even more angry next time." Varthak found himself kneeling to bring his massive frame down to the child's eye level. This close, he could see the intelligence and bravery that had allowed Marcus to maintain his composure even when surrounded by Kethtar warriors. "No," Varthak said quietly. "We will not hurt human children again." Marcus smiled brightly. "Good. Maybe we can be friends instead. I like making friends with people who are different from me." As Rodriguez led Marcus back toward the door, the boy turned for one final comment. "I hope your people learn to play games instead of hunting. Games are more fun, and nobody gets hurt." After the door closed behind them, Varthak remained kneeling on the deck of Morrison's ready room. The human admiral watched him with something that might have been sympathy. "Do you understand now, Fleet Commander? That child just offered to be friends with the creature who ordered his injury. That's what humans are like. We're capable of forgiveness and mercy, but we're also capable of assembling 100 warships when someone threatens our young." Varthak slowly stood, his worldview fundamentally altered by a brief conversation with an 8-year-old boy. "What happens now?" Morrison returned to his desk and pulled up a set of official documents. "Now you get to be the messenger. You're going to return to Kethtar space and explain to your government exactly what happened here. You're going to tell them that humanity is not a species they want to antagonize. And if they don't listen?" Morrison's expression hardened. "Then next time, we won't stop at a single battle fleet. We'll bring everything we have, and we'll keep bringing it until the threat to human children is permanently eliminated." Varthak was released 6 hours later aboard the least damaged of his surviving ships. His remaining crew was subdued and traumatized by their defeat, but they were alive and functional. Morrison had made sure the vessel was stocked with detailed records of the engagement, including sensor data showing the true size of the human response force. As the battered Kethtar ship limped away from New Haven, Varthak composed his report to the High Command. He tried to find words to explain what he had witnessed, how an agricultural colony had somehow triggered the mobilization of humanity's largest military response in their species' history. But every time he began writing, he found himself thinking about a small boy with healing wounds who had offered friendship to the creature responsible for his pain. That, more than the massive fleet or the overwhelming firepower, convinced Varthak that the Kethtar had made a fundamental error in their assessment of human civilization. They had assumed that humans would respond to aggression according to logical calculations of cost and benefit. Instead, humans had responded with something the Kethtar had never encountered before: unconditional love for their offspring and unlimited willingness to defend them. 3 months later, Varthak's report reached the Kethtar High Command. The military leaders read his account with growing disbelief, then reviewed the censored data and tactical analysis he had provided. The evidence was undeniable, but the implications were staggering. Humanity possessed the military capability to devastate entire star systems, but they had used that power only in response to an attack on a single child. They had offered mercy to defeated enemies, but had made it clear that future aggression would be met with escalating force. The High Command's decision was unanimous. The human species was to be classified as protected and avoided at all costs. No Kethtar ship would enter human space without explicit authorization, and any warrior who harmed a human civilian would be considered guilty of endangering the entire Kethtar race. Back on New Haven, life slowly returned to normal. Marcus recovered fully from his physical injuries, though he remained more cautious than he had been before the attack. The colony's population tripled as new settlers arrived, many of them military families attracted by the planet's reputation as one of the most well-defended human settlements in the galaxy. Captain Sarah Chen was promoted to planetary governor, a position that allowed her to ensure that no child would ever face the terror that Marcus had experienced. The wheat fields where her son had been injured were eventually replaced by a memorial garden, dedicated to the principle that human children should be able to play safely under alien suns. Admiral Morrison returned to his regular patrol duties, but he carried with him the knowledge that humanity's response to the Kethtar threat had fundamentally changed how other species viewed human civilization. Word spread through the galactic community about the battle fleet that had assembled to avenge an injured child. Some species found this response puzzling or irrational. Others saw it as evidence of a dangerous fanaticism that made humans unpredictable allies or enemies. But for those species that also valued their young above all else, humanity's actions sent a clear and comforting message. There were others in the galaxy who understood that some things were worth any price to defend. The Kethtar never again entered human space. Their hunting expeditions continued in other sectors, but they avoided any contact with human colonies or shipping routes. The species that had once believed themselves the apex predators of the galaxy had learned to fear a race that would mobilize everything they had to protect a single injured child. Marcus Chen grew up to become a diplomat, specializing in first contact protocols and interspecies relations. He often told the story of his encounter with the Kethtar warriors, but he always ended with the same observation. True strength wasn't measured by the ability to inflict harm, but by the willingness to endure any cost to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And somewhere in the depths of space, on a Kethtar military vessel, Varthak kept a recording of a human child offering friendship to the creature who had hurt him. Whenever young Kethtar warriors spoke of glory in battle or the thrill of the hunt, their former fleet commander would play that recording and remind them that there were forces in the universe more powerful than claws and weapons, forces like love, mercy, and the unbreakable determination to ensure that children could play safely in fields of golden wheat under the light of alien suns. The galaxy had learned an important lesson. Humanity would go to war for its children without hesitation or reservation. That knowledge became a foundation for peace that lasted for generations, built on the simple understanding that some things were too precious to be threatened and too important to be left undefended. Marcus Chen had been right all along. Games were more fun than hunting, and nobody had to get hurt.